Well, hello and welcome. I am gathering another one of our emergency meetings here today because we need to discuss the Bridgerton 2 collection. So Pat McGrath released her second installment in the Bridgerton collection. I think an installment that came as a surprise to a lot of us who didn't really expect there to be a follow-up of the first collection that was released not too long ago, in the end of last year. Now, the first collection was released exactly a year after the first season was released, and the release of this specific collection actually is coming more in line with the release of the actual season 2 and is supposedly based on season 2 and inspired by season 2. Now, I am going to leave all of my thoughts about the collection and about the color story and blah 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 to the very end of this video. And the way I'm going to do this video is, as you know, we keep the nerd levels when it comes to Pat McGrath makeup on this channel very, very high. So there will be looks, there will be swatches, I will do a bunch of comparison swatches, and we're just going to try everything. Before we get into that, I need to give credit where credit is due. I feel like in the grand scheme of things, my order was shipped relatively timely because on the website currently they have a 5 to 7 business days of processing your orders. Mine shipped exactly on day 7, and then because of course as usual I paid for the express shipping, it was here within a few days after it was shipped. So all in all, an okay experience, not the experience that I used to have in 2018 when I would like click on order, 10 minutes later they would ship my items and 3 days later they would be at home. Those days are long gone, but in the current state of affairs, I feel like that's pretty, it's pretty satisfactory. Now, unlike the first collection, this one comes with quite a few more items compared to the first collection. The first collection was basically, I think, 2 highlighters and the eyeshadow palette. This time around we have an eyeshadow palette. We have actually a completely new formula of lipstick. We have the round body shimmer things, as well as the blush palette and the black coal thing. I think that's everything that's in this collection. I don't use body shimmers. I have 5 of the original 8 blushes that she released last year, so I'm pretty set on her blushes at the moment. I am very curious though what other people are going to say about the formula, because the formula on these blushes is different than the original one that she released because the new ones are baked. I, however, absolutely had to purchase something from the lipsticks because 1, a satin cream lipstick, count me in, and 2, the packaging just looked absolutely irresistible to me. Now, because of that, and because I only ordered 1 of the lipsticks, the item that I would like to start this video off with is the lipstick. Now, the shade that I ordered is Elson 5. There were a variety of nude shades, and the only more poppy color was this red color, and I love a red lipstick, especially in a good cream formula. And I also don't have any of the original Elson lipsticks that she has released, so I was very excited to get at least 1 Elson in my life. Now, this comes in a box, very much, inspired by Bridgerton. I think the box is beautiful. I think the aesthetic of this whole collection is very much fitting within the aesthetic of Bridgerton, so personally I don't really have any complaints when it comes to the packaging of the lipsticks or the eyeshadow palettes. I know some people have had issues with those. I personally think they're fine and they pretty much fit the vibes of the Bridgerton show, and I think the outside packaging pretty well matches both seasons. So as far as packaging is concerned, because I might forget to comment on that later when we're talking about the eyeshadow palette, I have no qualms with the packaging. I think the packaging is fine. Now, the true surprise lies within when you take out the lipstick of the nice box and you're like, oh, well, this doesn't feel like one of my Lux Trans or Matte Trans lipsticks, because it ain't. Where should I even start? So let's start with the positive things. I do love the packaging. I think it's adorable. The little bow is just, it has my heart. I love it. With that said, the packaging of this is significantly cheaper feeling compared to her original matte and Lux Trans formula. So this is one of my original Lux Trans lipsticks. First of all, it's significantly bigger, it's significantly weightier. The outside feels on this one much more like a lacquered plastic, whereas this one feels more like, I don't know, plastic. It's also significantly lighter. Like if I take out the cap and I compare it to the cap of one of my Lux Trans lipsticks, This is much heavier, much weightier, much more luxurious feeling. This is a little bit oblique here. This is completely flat. It has a little bit of like that gold detail. Here you just have like a little drawing of a gold detail, a little bit like the stringy things that were drawn on some of the Mothership palettes a while back and people were super pissed about it. And yeah, overall, like you can also see that there's a little bit of like that gold detailing here on the original Lux strands, whereas it's just plastic on the new ones. So I did hear that being mentioned on Alicia's channel when she did her thoughts, she didn't call it a review, on this collection, and I was very curious to hold it in my hands. Now with that said, it doesn't feel like a $5 lipstick, but it feels cheaper than the original Lux Trans lipstick and Matte Trans lipsticks that she released. So if you were under the impression this is going to feel like this, but then come in the cutesy pink or blue packaging, you were wrong. In addition to that, these are also cheaper. So I paid 31 euros for this lipstick, that's after tax and everything. I live in the Netherlands, so I can only see the prices of these items after they have added like the customs taxes, whatever. And here in the Netherlands, her Lux Trans and Matte, well, the Lux Trans was discontinued. What am I talking about? The Matte Trans lipsticks here cost about 40 euros. So yes, these are about 10 euros cheaper, and they also feel about 10 euros cheaper. But of course, it is not just about the packaging. It is also about the actual lipstick and the formula and the color. And I want to throw in that I am not super bothered by the fact that they've downplayed the packaging, because first of all, that's reflected in the price, and second of all, I'm well aware of the state of the world, okay? I can see all around that there is shortages of things, there is a fucking war going on, and a slightly cheaper packaging on a Pat McGrath lipstick probably isn't the end of the world. So for whatever reason, she wasn't able to do her standard super luxurious packaging, and I think we can let it slide. Also, just for reference, this has 4 grams of product, this has 3.7 grams of product, which is really not that much less. So the actual amount of product that you're getting doesn't vary that much. It's really only the outer packaging. Now, I am so excited, and I'm doubly excited because she discontinued the Lux Trans formula, and she's calling these lipsticks the Satin Allure, so they're a completely different type of formula, and I'm very curious how they compare to the original Lux Trans formula and to her more recently released the Vinyl formula. So, with that said, let's apply Elson 5. So here you have Elson 5. I believe she describes Elson 5 as a classic red, so I would assume that it's a more blue-toned red, and I would agree with that. The formula. I think the formula of these is very intriguing because it is not the Lux Trans formula. I do have a red from the Lux Trans formula, and I can sort of try to swatch them on the back of my hand for you to kind of explain the difference. I don't know whether that's going to do anything for anyone, but you know, we can try it. So this is one of my Lux Trans lipsticks. This is the shade McGrath Muse, which is a more warm-toned red. These have a lot of grip to them. They are quite, they're not thick on the lips, but they pack a punch on the lips. And they are very long-lasting. They don't really have much of a sheen to them, which is why it always confused me why people would call these lipsticks cream lipsticks, because they felt more like a comfort matte to me. And I loved them. I loved her Lux Trans formula. It was actually my favorite, and I favored it above the Matte Trans formula, which I found to be at times a little bit too heavy and a little bit too drying for me. Now, the Vinyl formula, which is the one that she released more recently, and it comes in this more round packaging. I have another red. This is the shade Temptress. Let me swatch this next to McGrath Muse. You can see how much less opaque this is in terms of color payoff, and how much shinier it is in terms of its finish. And that is also how these lipsticks look on the lips. These are a very opaque balm, in my opinion. They're not quite a lip balm, but they're also not quite a cream lipstick. And now, where does the new formula, the Satin Allure formula, stand? It stands honestly somewhere in between. Let me just quickly swatch the shade Elson 5 here for you, so that you can see that it has opacity, but not quite the opacity that the original Lux Trans formula had, and also not quite the sheerness that the Divinyls have. These on the lips feel very lightweight, creamy and comfortable. I think this lipstick formula is going to be one of my absolute favorite formulas from her, because I cherish comfort above everything else. I don't mind reapplying my lipsticks, especially when my lipsticks come in this packaging. In fact, I like this formula so much that I might be tempted to eventually pick up one of the more nude shades. But I'm super happy to have it in a red lipstick formula, because I love wearing red lipstick. Alright, let's move to the eyeshadow palette. So the Belle of the Ball, this is the outside box that it came with, and the actual packaging of the eyeshadow palette looks exactly the same. Like I said, to me this is very fitting with the aesthetic of Bridgerton. And I want to talk about like the technical specs of this eyeshadow palette now, and we're going to leave all the rest of the rambling to the end of the video. Now, what set apart the original 6-pan Bridgerton palette from every other 6-pan that Pat McGrath has ever released was the presence of astrals. We have never seen her baked formulas in one of her 6-pan eyeshadow palette. And this collection is not only a return of these formulas, but even an upgrade of that, because this eyeshadow contains 2 astral shades. So these are the shade Diamond's Desire and Forever Charmed. And additionally, it contains another one of her baked satin matte shades, which is a formula that was completely new and introduced with the original Bridgerton palette, where she had 2 of those shades. And the shade that is in this palette here, in this formula, is this one, the shade Regency Romance. So that brings our total of baked shades into one of her 6-pans up to 3, which is about half of the palette. And if it weren't for the fact that this comes in a cardboard packaging, I think we could all agree that this could count as a mini mothership palette, because it contains quite a variety of different finishes. The price of this, for me, like I said, after taxes and all, is 73 euros. And I feel like for the presence of all these different types of formulas, and especially the sparklier, baked, more expensive formulas, this palette has a relatively justified price to it. And if you were someone who always wanted to have a mothership palette, but you couldn't quite splurge on the $125, this might be a good entry for you to try all the different formulas, because there's a matte, there's a metallic, there is, like I said, that new baked satin matte formula, and you got 2 astrals, and may I say gorgeous astrals at that. And like you, I am very, very excited to swatch this eyeshadow palette, so let's just go ahead and do that. I am going to do this in this order. I'm going to start with the champagne pink and then move on into the first astral, then switch to the second row, and then move on to the second astral. So the first shade is a classic champagne pink in a metallic formula. It is called Refinement, and it feels pretty much like most other like champagne satin shades from Pat McGrath. It has a slightly metallic finish to it, but it's not an overwhelmingly and like very shiny metallic shade. It's one of those that, you know, needs to serve the purpose of probably being used not only on your eyes but also on your face. Now, speaking of a shade that can be used both on the eyes and on the face, we have another one of those, like I said, satin matte baked shades, and this is the shade Regency Romance, which is like a subdued corally pink is what I would call this shade. I don't know whether you would agree with me. And then the last shade in this row, and the most exciting shade, is Diamond's Desire, which looks to be some sort of like a peachy pink gold astral. So here you have a swatch for Diamond's Desire. So this shade is a very interesting one, and I think it's going to be super nice on its own, but also as a layering eyeshadow. So you will see this shade come back in my pet pairing series, I think, quite a bit. Moving on to the second row, we got the classic Plum Matte. There you have it. I don't know that there is much to say about a Plum Matte from Pat McGrath Labs at this point, other than she knows how to do them, they're fine. And then one of the more intriguing shades in this row, which is this shade, oh sorry, I forgot to tell you, the matte shade was called for Forbidden Amour, and this is called Darling Dandy. And this shade Very interesting. It has a little bit of like dryness to it. Usually her metallic shades feel really creamy and emollient. This one almost has a bit of a dryness to it. And it is like an aqua minty blue. I'm also very intrigued by this shade because of not only the formula but also the color. It's very hard to say whether this is going to look more blue or more green when you put it on the lid. And last but certainly not least, and I can't wait to dig my finger into this eyeshadow, we have Gigabyte 2.0, aka Forever Charmed. This is a chartreuse in her Astral formula. Beautiful. You know we're going to swatch this shade next to Gigabyte from Subversive later. But before we move into that, let's do two eyeshadow looks. Now, as far as the looks are concerned, I'm sure that a lot of people will want to tell me that it's totally possible and it will look really pretty to combine the chartreuse shade with one of the purples. But as far as I see it in this specific eyeshadow palette, the chartreuse shade is like a one and done eyeshadow for me. And because I don't want to dip into another eyeshadow palette, I'm probably going to just use this shade on its own for the second look, and I have not quite decided yet how to pair it with the rest of the shades, but I'm going to decide it on the spot. Now for the rest of the shades, I think I have a pretty good idea what I want to do for my look. I want to apply this shade and this shade in my crease, so I'm going to put this one more towards the inner part of my crease, this one towards the outer part of my crease. Then I'm going to put the tiniest bit of this satin champagne shade onto my lids, and over top of that I'm going to apply this Astral here, and I want to play around with where I'm going to place the mint blue shade. Maybe in my inner corners or maybe as an accent on my lower lash line, but we shall see. I'm taking a small blending brush and dipping into the pink shade, the one that's the baked satin formula, and I'm going to, like I said, apply that here onto the inner portion of my crease. These baked satin mattes are an extremely pleasant formula to work with. They're very lightweight, they basically blend themselves out and they look gorgeous on the skin. It's also a very overcast day, so I put on my ring light on in case you are seeing a little bit of a difference with the lighting of this video. Then I'm going to take the plum shade using the same brush, and I'm going to basically apply that here into the outer portion of the eye. Next, just using my finger, I'm going to go into the satin champagne pink shade, and I'm going to pop that on my lid. This has surprisingly more shine than I anticipated from a shade in this specific formula. It's a pretty shade, it's a nice neutral shade. And now for the most exciting part, I'm just going to use my finger to dip into the Astral shade, which is called Diamond's Desire, and I'm going to press that on my lids. As you can see, I am not applying any glitter glue, mostly because I'm feeling lazy. But on a regular day, I would probably apply glitter glue before applying this shade. But as you can see, it sticks to the lid really beautifully even without the glitter glue, and it is a gorgeous topper shade. It has a lot of twinkle in it. I'm going to shine an artificial light on it later on so that you can see all the little twinkles, but it is a gorgeous shade. I'm going to take a small pencil brush and go back into the plum matte that I applied in my outer corner and just run that here along my lower lash line. And I am very curious about the mint shade, so I am actually going to apply that all over my inner corners because I'm curious if it will take on a more green or a more blue hue once you apply it on the skin. And my hope is that it will take on a more green hue. I don't know what you guys think, but to me this is definitely more like a pastel mint. It just has like a hint, a dash of aqua blue in it, but for the most part to me this is really a pastel mint green. I love it. This is a beautiful shade and also quite unique for Pat McGrath. We don't really have a mint green in our collection just yet. I'm going to take the Worker Pro from Sonia G and I'm going to dip into this chartreuse shade, and just using the brush I'm going to apply it all over the lid and then blend it out. Again, not going to use glitter glue for the time being. I might pop on glitter glue in a little bit, but for now I just want to apply this shade all over my lid to see how it feels and to see how it blends out. And honestly, so far it is behaving like one of her, actually this feels more like one of her like Blitz or VR shades than it does as one of her Astros. So the shade Diamond Desire, the flaky, sparkly stuff, that is definitely an Astral. But this shade is not something that I would qualify as an Astral. To me, this feels more like a Blitz shade, actually. And her Blitz shades are gorgeous because they blend out so easily. Okay, and because I'm a very, very curious creature, I am going to grab my NYX glitter glue and I'm going to apply the tiniest bit of that on my lid and inner corners, because I want to see how that Gigabyte 2.0 shade applies over glitter glue. So I'm going to pop that right here and also in my inner corner. And then I'm going to actually just use my finger. Yeah, this feels more like a Blitz to me, you guys. Also, it feels a lot like Gigabyte. And then I'm going to pop this like this all over the lid. In my inner corners, I'm just going to take the Satin Champagne shade. And I think in order to incorporate a little bit the rest of the colors, I'm actually going to apply the Plum Matte shade, so the shade Forbidden Amour, on my lower lashes, because I actually think that the green and this plum shade might look really beautiful together. And since we're here and we are playing, I'm going to take a few flakes from that Diamond's Desire shade, the pink topper shade, and I'm going to just apply the tiniest bit here onto the center of the lid for some extra sparkle. I look like the dude from Batman. Anyway, so here are the two finished looks, and in order to not distract you, I'm just going to do this. So this is the more like pinky look with a pop of mint green, and this is your more chartreuse look. And now let's do the artificial light, shall we? Sparkly. Oh, even more sparkly. Now, shall we do some comparison swatches? Let's start with the most fun exercise, Bridgerton 1 versus Bridgerton 2. Find the differences. Obviously, we're going to start off by comparing the two pink baked satin shades and the two plums, because yes. So here we have the satin baked matte from Bridgerton 2, and here we have the baked matte satin shade from Bridgerton 1. Just FYI, if you were here for the bees, you'd be sorely disappointed because they're already coming off. And okay, here we have Bridgerton 2. Now this is much more of like a cool toned raspberry pink, whereas this, like I said also when I was watching it, feels much more like a coral peachy pink. So at least in that aspect, I have to say I prefer the tones of the shade from Bridgerton 2, because I'm more likely to use something with a coral peach tone to it than something with a really pink tone to it. Let's move on to the plum matte shades. So here we have the second Bridgerton palette, here we have the first Bridgerton palette, and while they're both plums, this is obviously so much more cool toned, this has much more red in it, but they're both plums, you know. Again, yes, we know that Pat can do a plum. I am really far too bored by the plum matte shades to go through my whole collection and swatch all of the matte plum shades that Pat McGrath has released, but I'm just searching for the one that is the most similar to the one from the new Bridgerton palette, and I think the one we're talking about is this one here from the Divine Rose 2 palette, which seems rather similar, at least in the pan, but let's see how it swatches. Yeah, so I would say these two are quite similar. Obviously, this is a little bit more subtle compared to this in terms of like the tone. This is a little bit more like punchy, whereas this is a little more neutral in tone. But with that said, they are very much in the same realm, and I think on the eye you're probably not going to be able to tell the difference. Just for shits and giggles, I can swatch the Astral shade from the original Bridgerton palette next to the Mint shade from the new palette. And may I say that the Mint shade is one of the shades that I am absolutely head over heels in love with in that new Bridgerton palette, because I think it is exactly what I was hoping for it to be, which is a, you know, mint green, pastel mint green. And then we have the Astral from Bridgerton 1, which you can see is much more like an actual blue-purple shade, whereas this is much more green-leaning. And if you were really curious, let's watch the satin metallic shades from Bridgerton 2 and Bridgerton 1. So again, we have Bridgerton 1, Bridgerton 2. I think the one in the Bridgerton 2 palette is just a little bit deeper, almost like a pink with a bit of a gold in it. And I feel like with that, we have swatched everything that is comparable between the two Bridgerton releases, and we can move on to some other comparisons. And I think I'm going to leave Gigabyte for last, okay? Sorry. We do want to end on a plot twist. Now, I would like to swatch a few shades that slightly remind me of the Astral in here. Now, one thing I want to say about this Astral, I was kind of hoping it would have a bit stronger, like, copper tones to it, like peachy copper tones to it. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It's still a very interesting shade, and I want to withhold judgment until I have used it enough times to really, like, truly form an opinion on it. But it's beautiful, it's very sparkly, and it has a very interesting tone to it. So let's just swatch this shade first here, and then swatch a couple of other Astrals that I think might be similar to this one. The first one that comes to mind is actually a shade from none other than the Bronze Seduction palette. There is something about the coolness of the pink that reminds me a little bit of this shade here, which I believe also to be an Astral, because it has like that similarly very flaky and sparkly tone to it. So let's watch this shade here. So as you can see, obviously this is much deeper in tone and has a little bit more of like the copper rose tone. But this one seems almost like the lighter sister. You know, there's something about the tones of these eyeshadows that reads very similar to me. Another one that I would like to swatch, because I see little flecks of gold in the Bridgerton 2 eyeshadow. I want to swatch this one from Ritualistic Rose, just to see how they compare. I think this one's going to be much more golden in tone, but still I would like to see them side by side. Okay, actually, like this side by side, I would say that on the eye, this is just probably going to lean a bit more golden, whereas this is a bit more cool-toned pink. And last but not least, I wanted to swatch the Astral from the Divine Rose 2 palette, so this one over here, because it's again one of those beautiful like neutrals with like flashes of pink in it. It's actually one of my favorite Astrals from Pat McGrath. Okay, this is also much more champagne in terms of the base tone, whereas this is much more of like that cool-toned pink. I don't know, this is a very unique shade. I don't think Pat has anything in her collection that is a mint green. I'm not even going to bother swatching any of the other blues, because most of the other blues that she has made are more teal, or like the true royal blue that she has in the Subliminal palette. To me, this mint shade is very unique to this specific palette, and I don't think Pat has anything quite like it in her other eyeshadows. The same, however, cannot be said about a deep special shade Baked Chartreuse Green. So let us first of all put up the two shades kind of side by side. So here you have Gigabyte and here you have the shade from the new palette. I struggle to find any differences. Also on the eye, just with the naked eye, without, you know, getting a microscope with a 60-time magnification, I cannot tell the difference between the two shades. So let's go ahead and swatch them. We're going to give Gigabyte the honors of having her own arm swatch. So I'm going to start with the Bridgerton palette, and then I'm going to do the old one. Just looking at them on my finger, this is the new shade, this is the old shade. They are about 99.99% identical. I cannot tell the difference. Maybe this one is a little bit softer in terms of the finish, because the old shade has a little bit of that dryness to the formula, and it's a bit shinier and slightly more golden, but we're really like splitting hairs here. So here we have Forever Charmed. And here we have Gigabyte. Despite the similarities, I still feel like these are slightly different from each other, and I want to also shine an artificial light on them just so we can appreciate the sparkliness a little bit. Let me see, how am I going to do this? Okay, so here we have the two shades when I shine an artificial light. You can see that Gigabyte is beautiful and very sparkly, but I feel like the new shade has like even more of that like chartreuse metallic finish, and it's even sparklier. So if anything, this is indeed Gigabyte 2.0. And you know what, I'm not mad about Gigabyte 2.0 because I love my Gigabyte shade. I don't know whether you can see the teeny tiny little like raised things here. That's unfortunately a pan. So as far as I'm concerned, the Gigabyte 2.0, not the worst thing in the world. I'm going to leave the comparison swatches here, and now we're going to move on to talking about my whole feelings, thoughts and ramblings about this collection. Now, unlike with the first season and the first Bridgerton palette, I am a little bit better prepared this time around because I did actually just finish watching season 2. When the Bridgerton 1 collection was released, I had finished watching the season already like 8 months prior to that, and I couldn't even remember the names of the main characters. I zoomed you out a little bit. Whereas this time I actually just finished watching the show and I have a much better idea of what the palette, you know, gets its inspiration from, and I can comment more on that. I kind of want to like split myself into two different people when I talk about this collection. I want to talk about this collection as someone who has nothing else from Pat McGrath Labs, and I want to talk about it also as someone who is a collector of Pat McGrath Labs. Now, let's start off with just these eyeshadows in terms of how dupable they are even within Pat McGrath's own collection, and if you're a collector, do you really need this eyeshadow palette because you don't give a shit about Bridgerton? Hey Nicola J! Nicola wants to be an influencer. Fellow Pat McGrath makeup collectors, if you don't give a shit about Bridgerton and you're only here for what is new and exciting about this eyeshadow palette, then honestly, it's not much. We can split hairs and say that this is not quite like Gigabyte. We can say that this shade is not quite like all the other toppers that she has. These two shades, are they somewhat different from the one in the original Bridgerton palette? They're somewhat different, yes. Mag mama praten. The only truly original, new and unique shade in this eyeshadow palette is the mint green. That is truly unique and I'm super excited about it. I cannot wait to put it all over my lids. I love it as an inner corner highlight. But with that said, if you were just here for new eyeshadows and new astrals, you are barking at the wrong tree. You're not going to get it with this collection. And now I turned to the population out there who is a fan of Bridgerton and doesn't really have that much Pat McGrath Labs makeup. I actually really like this collection. I like it more than I liked the original Bridgerton palette. The original Bridgerton palette excited me a lot because there were astrals and baked shades in a 6-pan. That was just like fucking mind-blowing to me. But for the rest, besides the astral and this metallic purpley shade that looks a lot like Eleganza from the Divine Rose 2 palette, there isn't really much more going on to this palette. It's also a bit of like a one-trick pony. You can't really get much of variation when it comes to your looks because they're always going to be either purpley mauve or raspberry pink. That's it. You're not going to get much more out of it. Whereas with this second palette, you are again getting only 6 eyeshadows, but I think you're getting much more of a variety of shades. You get the chartreuse, you get the mint green, you get the plum and the pink, you get these beautiful hard to describe astral shade, and you get such a more full experience because you get 3 of these baked shades. So all in all, I would say you're getting more out of this than you were getting from the original Bridgerton palette. But that will also all of course come down to personal color preferences. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Like I said, to me this feels like a mini mothership palette. You get such a variety of different finishes in here and you get those beautiful, you know, standout formulas that she's so famous for, but not quite for $125. And if you happen to be a fan of Bridgerton, let's talk a little bit about the inspiration behind this palette, because this is a part that confuses me a little bit. I am unsure what exactly the inspiration for this color story was. So the main story focuses around the sisters Edwina and Kate Sharma and the second sibling from the Bridgerton family, Anthony Bridgerton. And the love story basically is centered around Kate and Anthony. Now I can see Edwina represented in this palette. Now obviously the eyeshadows are not inspired by the makeup that they were wearing in the Regency era. They are inspired by the costumes in the show. Who'd tell? And when it comes to the costumes in the show, they are very colorful, and each character kind of has their own like color palette. So let's talk about Edwina and Kate. Like Anthony didn't really wear anything, I think, besides a black, so I can't really say that there was any color representation for him in this eyeshadow palette, whereas in the first Bridgerton palette the plum was actually a reflection of the male protagonist. Yes. Now here I think we're mostly talking about the females on the show. I can see Edwina represented very much so in this shade here, like the pinky shade, because she wore a lot of these very light baby pink, peachy pink sort of dresses. And then I am very confused because the actual lead, the female protagonist of season 2, Kate, wore a lot of purple, like jewel toned purple, and a lot of teal. And I don't see her represented anywhere in here. An argument could be made that maybe she is represented by the plum shade, but I really can't imagine that to be the case, because I would imagine that the actual lead of the show would get her own, you know, astral shade, which I don't see in here. I don't see Kate represented in this palette. If they were going for Penelope, so Lady Whistledown with the chartreuse shade, they were getting in the ballpark of Penelope, but then again, if we watch the show, 90% of what Penelope wears is yellow. Are we ever going to see yellow represented in these eyeshadow palettes if they truly are a reflection of the show? I would love to see an astral take on the yellows that Penelope wears in the show. I'd love that. And I've also seen the mint color represented quite a few times, more specifically in the second, like kind of like the sub-story going on within the main story, which is, you know, the story between Eloise Bridgerton and Penelope, aka Lady Whistledown. Don't want to spoil it for anyone, but there's like something going on between the two of them that, you know, leads up to a plot twist in the end of the season. Eloise wears a lot of these mint greeny types of dresses. So overall, I would say I understand the inspiration behind some of these colors, but I'm truly shocked by the fact that there is nothing in this eyeshadow palette to represent Kate Sharma. So I don't know, maybe. I've been rambling for 1.5 hours. There's going to be a lot of editing in here, and I think I'm going to leave it at that. So the two of us are going to now go bake cookies. We shall leave you with your own thoughts to share in the comment section below. I'm very excited to hear what you think about the palette. If you got it, are you disappointed? Are you happy? What do you think about the inspiration? Did it really take inspiration from the show, or do you really think that it's Pat doing her thing, giving her the same things over and over again, but then calling it inspired by Bridgerton? Do you guys really think Pat McGrath is aware of the level of nerd that exists within her brand fan base? Do you think she's aware of how nerdy we have gotten with her brand? I'm not sure she does. I think if she did, maybe she would like make palettes especially for us. But as it is, I think she's just making palettes for the regular Joe out there who doesn't own 15 eyeshadow palettes from Pat McGrath. So I think that's something we should not forget. Anyway, I'm tired of rambling. I'm going to bake cookies. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to share your thoughts. Bye!
Bye!